drink, the stranger, holding his at arm's length, said, "Here's a toast for you, to General Grant, the ablest—" But the toast was never finished, for Priest dashed the contents of his glass in the stranger's face, and calmly replacing the glass on the bar, backed across the room towards us. When half across, a sudden movement on the part of the stranger caused him to halt, but it seemed the picturesque gentleman beside the bar was only searching his pockets for a handkerchief. "Don't you get your hand on that gun you wear," said the rebel, whose blood was up, "unless you intend to use it. But you can't shoot a minute too quick to suit me. What do you wear a gun for, anyhow? Let's see how straight you can shoot." As the stranger made no reply, Priest continued, "The next time you have anything to rub in, pick your man better. The man who insults me gets all that's due him for his trouble." Still eliciting no response, the rebel taunted him further, saying, "Go on and finish your toast, you patriotic beauty. I'll give you another. Jeff Davis and the Southern Confederacy." We all rose from the table, and Flood, going over to Priest, said, "Come along, Paul. We don't want to have any trouble here. Let's go across the street and have a game of California Jack." But the rebel stood like a chiseled statue, ignoring the friendly counsel of our foreman, while the stranger, after wiping the liquor from his face and person, walked across the room and seated himself at the table from which he had risen. A stillness of death pervaded the room, which was only broken by our foreman repeating his request to Priest to come away, but the latter replied, "No, when I leave this place it will not be done in fear of anyone. When a man goes out of his way to insult me, he must take the consequences, and he can always find me if he wants satisfaction. We'll take another drink before we go. Everybody in the house, come up and take a drink with Paul Priest." The inmates of the place, to the number of possibly 20, who had been witness to what had occurred, accepted the invitation, quitting their games and gathering around the bar. Priest took a position at the end of the bar, where he could notice any movement on the part of his adversary, as well as the faces of his guests, and smiling on them, said in true hospitality, "What will you have, gentlemen?" There was a forced effort on the part of the drinkers to appear indifferent to the situation, but with a stranger sitting sullenly in their rear, and an iron gray man standing at the farther end of the line, hungering for an opportunity to settle differences with six-shooters, their indifference was an empty mockery. Some of the players returned to their games, while others sauntered into the street. Yet Priest showed no disposition to go. After a while the stranger walked over to the bar and called for a glass of whiskey. The rebel stood at the end of the bar calmly rolling a cigarette, and as the stranger seemed not to notice him, Priest attracted his attention and said, "I'm just passing through here and shall only be in town this afternoon, so if there's anything between us that demands settlement, don't hesitate to ask for it." The stranger drained his glass at a single gulp, and with admirable composure replied, "If there's anything between us, we'll settle it in due time, and as men usually settle such differences in this country. I have a friend or two in town, and as soon as I have seen them, you will receive notice, or you may consider the matter dropped. That's all I care to say at present." He walked away to the rear of the room. Priest joined us, and we strolled out of the place. In the street, a grizzled, gray-bearded man who had drunk with him inside approached my bunkie and said, "You want to watch that fellow. He claims to be from Gallatin County, but he isn't, for I live there. There's a pal with him, and they've got some good horses, but I know every brand on the headwaters of the Missouri, and their horses were never bred on any of its three forks. Don't give him any the best of you. Keep an eye on him, comrade." After this warning, the old man turned into the first open door, and we crossed over to the wheelwright's shop, and as the wheel would not be finished for several hours yet, we continued our survey of the town, and our next landing was at the Buffalo Bull. On entering, we found 4 of our men in a game of cards at the very first table, while Officer was reported as being in the gambling room in the rear. The only vacant table in the bar room was the last one in the far corner, and calling for a deck of cards, we occupied it. I sat with my back to the log wall of the low one-story room, while on my left and fronting the door, Priest took a seat with Flood for his partner, while Honeyman fell to me. After playing a few hands, Flood suggested that Billy go forward and exchange seats with some of our outfit, so as to be near the door where he could see anyone that entered, while from his position the rear door would be similarly guarded. Under this change, Rod Wheat came back to our table and took Honeyman's place. We had been playing along for an hour, with people passing in and out of the gambling room, and expected shortly to start for camp, when Priest's long-haired adversary came in at the front door, and walking through the room, passed into the gambling department. John Officer, after winning a few dollars in the card room, was standing alongside watching our game, and as the stranger passed by, Priest gave him the wink, on which Officer followed the stranger and a heavy-set companion who was with him into the rear room. We had played only a few hands when the heavy-set man came back to the bar, took a drink, and walked over to watch a game of cards at the second table from the front door. Officer came back shortly afterwards and whispered to us that there were 4 of them to look out for, as he had seen them conferring together. Priest seemed the least concerned of any of us, but I noticed he eased the holster on his belt forward, where it would be ready to his hand. We had called for a round of drinks, Officer taking one with us, when 2 men came out of the gambling hall, and halting at the bar, pretended to divide some money which they wished to have it appear that they had won in the card room. Their conversation was loud and intended to attract attention, but Officer gave us the wink, and their ruse was perfectly understood. After taking a drink and attracting as much attention as possible over the division of the money, they separated, but remained in the room. I was dealing the cards a few minutes later when the long-haired man emerged from the gambling hall, and, imitating the maudlin, sauntered up to the bar and asked for a drink. After being served, he walked about halfway to the door, then, whirling suddenly, stepped to the end of the bar, placed his hands upon it, sprang up and stood upright on it. He whipped out 2 6-shooters, let loose a yell which caused a commotion throughout the room, and walked very deliberately the length of the counter, his attention centered upon the occupants of our table. Not attracting the notice he expected in our quarter, he turned and slowly repaced the bar, hurling anathemas on Texas and Texans in general. I saw the rebel's eyes, steeled to intensity, meet Flood's across the table, and in that glance of our foreman he evidently read approval, for he rose rigidly with the stealth of a tiger, and for the first time that day his hand went to the handle of his 6-shooter. One of the 2 pretended winners at cards saw the movement in our quarter and sang out a warning, "Cuidado mucho!" The man on the bar whirled on the word of warning, and blazed away with his 2 guns into our corner. I had risen at the word, and was pinned against the wall, where on the first fire a rain of dirt fell from the chinking in the wall over my head. As soon as the others sprang away from the table, I kicked it over in clearing myself, and came to my feet just as the rebel fired his second shot. I had the satisfaction of seeing his long-haired adversary reel backwards, firing his guns into the ceiling as he went, and, in falling, crash heavily into the glassware on the back bar. The smoke which filled the room left nothing visible for a few moments. Meantime, Priest, satisfied that his aim had gone true, turned, passed through the rear room, gained his horse, and was galloping away to the herd before any semblance of order was restored. As the smoke cleared away and we passed forward through the room, John Officer had one of the 3 partners standing with his hands to the wall, while his 6-shooter lay on the floor under Officer's foot. He had made but 1 shot into our corner when the muzzle of a gun was pushed against his ear with an imperative order to drop his arms, which he had promptly done. The 2 others, who had been under the surveillance of our men at the forward table, never made a move or offered to bring a gun into action, and after the killing of their picturesque partner, passed together out of the house. There had been 5 or 6 shots fired into our corner, but the first double shot